A while back, I made a video highlighting some excellent indie games that felt like they were driving the industry forward. And one of those titles I mentioned was Little Gator Game, an extremely cute adventure that seemed to be heavily inspired by a short hike, another one of my personal faves. I talked about how this sort of feels like its own burgeoning genre, and I couldn't wait to see more like it in the future. But a lot of the comments on that video mentioned some other games that I hadn't heard of that already seemed to fit that label quite well. So I'm gonna share some of those with you today, because it really is a style of game that I think needs more attention in today's gaming landscape. So let's get a cup of hot cocoa, cozy up under a warm blanket, and check out some adorable little video games. But before we do, speaking of cuddling up, let's talk about today's sponsor, Manta Sleep. Manta Sleep offers a large variety of premium sleep masks and other accessories to help with getting a good night's rest, which for me was an easy choice because I have young kids who really like to sneak into our bed and make that more difficult. I greatly enjoyed the Manta Sleep Mask Pro because it was so comfortable and completely blocked out all light, even into the morning. It has a simple Velcro strap on the back and hardly felt like I was wearing it at all. They also have noise machines or earplugs if you happen to have a wife that likes to snore. I wouldn't know anything about that. And if you use my promo code SnowmanGaming, you'll get 10% off your order. So if you want a better night's sleep, check out Manta Sleep below. Okay, now back to the video. So what exactly makes a game a short hike-alike? Well, if you remember the original, which, by the way, if you haven't played that yet, please immediately stop and go do that. It's under $5 if you can find it on sale and is only about an hour long, but perfectly shows how much content and emotion you can load into such a small package. But in that game, the goal is to reach the peak of a mountain, by gathering resources and increasing your stamina to make it possible. And you achieve this by completing tasks for people around the island. But the rest of the experience really comes down to vibes. It feels like being on summer vacation, meeting new friends, and getting into humorous hijinks. There's plenty to do and find in a tightly packed open world, and it caps off with a moment of introspection and discovering something about yourself as you reach your final destination. I don't want to get too narrow with our definition here, but usual themes throughout are freedom of exploration, growing stronger, and a funny cast of characters to interact with. If that sounds like something that's up your alley, the first short hike-alike you should check out is Smushi Come Home. You wake up as this cute little mushroom guy who's playing with his siblings when he suddenly gets snatched up by a bird and dropped in a nest far away from home and needs to somehow find his way back. You'll meet an assortment of bugs and other creatures along the way that'll give you helpful tools for exploration, like a leaf to float around or hiking gear to climb walls. From there, you'll survey various levels trying to get closer and closer to your family, but sometimes the path will be blocked and you need to help out villagers in need, or buy upgrades to your equipment to reach higher heights. It's all wrapped up in a I'm super tiny in this big world aesthetic similar to Pikmin, so you'll use an Allen wrench to mine rocks, or put on a Christmas light to explore caverns. Throw in customizable caps for your mushroom, tons of puzzles and goodies to collect, and a warm fuzzy soundtrack, and Smushi Come Home was an absolute joy to see where the story takes you, and even go back to 100% complete. Next up is Little Kitty Big City, which begins with a morning stretch out the window that sends our hero tumbling down into the concrete jungle below, in hopes of finding their way back to their owner in the high-rise apartment. You can climb up certain walls, but only for a short time, so you need to find fish around the city to build your strength and complete your goal. They lean heavily into the cat theming here. Water in the street scares Kitty, so you need to find other ways around. You can nuzzle up to people or knock items off of shelves, and even sneak up and catch unsuspecting birds. There's a little bit of Untitled Goose Game here too. You can cause all sorts of chaos in shops or trip people in the streets if your naughty little heart desires. I also like the recurring idea of buying different hats to customize your style for this genre. It lends itself perfectly to the cozy atmosphere of short hike-alikes. The quests you accomplish are about what you would expect here, like leading ducks back to their mother or climbing through alleyway windows to enter locked buildings. But there's also some bizarre things too, like manholes being portals to another dimension that can act as your fast travel points. And as you build your stamina to climb higher, it ends with some tricky jumps up the apartment building to put your skills to the test. A perfect, succinct little adventure. Also, they call the sprint button getting the zoomies in this game, so I mean, come on, that's an easy recommendation for me. Perhaps my favorite of the bunch, though, is a wacky little title called Tiny Terry's Turbo Trip, because it's as hilarious as it is insane. You play as Terry, who wants to get a car so he can drive it into space. Typical Tuesday, right? So he gets a job as a taxi driver and sets out to gain enough turbo boosters to climb the highway into the sky. The thing is, there are no rules in the town of Spranklewater. You can steal people's vehicles, beat them with a lead pipe, no one seems to mind or care, so it essentially feels like Grand Theft Auto if everyone was a Muppet. They even have those Banjo-Kazooie grunts instead of talking. It's great. And I wasn't joking about how funny this game is. Some of the encounters you'll come across are downright hysterical. Like a mobster you meet by the dumpsters who asks if you want to engage in some crimes with him, but then can't think of any crimes to do. Or this guy who loves sunbathing so much he gets progressively more crispy every time you check on him. Or a new friend who tells you his phone number is Oh, I guess that's it. There's so many things to do in TTTT, and every one of them is a delight. It's probably the biggest game on this list, but since you can drive around, it still felt tightly contained and easy to navigate. There's tons of clever secrets here too, and frankly, it's just exactly the unique kind of experience I'm looking for in games these days. Can't recommend it enough. This last one is a bit of a stretch in terms of being a short hike-alike, but I'd be remiss not to mention it here because I loved it so much. Valley Peaks. Rather than increasing stamina to reach a single goal, this is a first-person climbing game about summiting various mountains and turning on radio towers at the top to connect their signals. You click the left and right mouse buttons, or triggers if you're on controller, to use your left and right hands respectively and jump to reach outcroppings on the mountainside. Over time, it'll add all sorts of different obstacles, like crumbling boulders that fall apart after a few seconds, exploding orbs to launch you high in the air, or stoplight rocks that are grabbable if they're green or yellow, but once they turn red, your hand will slip right off. If you mess up or miss a grab, you'll plummet all the way down to the bottom and have to climb it again. But I noticed it's not very punishing, as each climb is only a few minutes at most, and sometimes have safety ledges along the way acting as pseudo checkpoints, so you don't lose progress on the especially daunting climbs. It's a bizarre combination of stress and intense focus as you get higher up, and relaxation as you find the zen state of quickly hopping from rock to rock. As you journey farther along, you'll gather mushrooms and spare parts, which can unlock new abilities or upgrades, like a slow motion watch, a hang glider, or even a radio that can place your own checkpoints as you climb. These use fuel that can recharge over time, but eventually as you crest the highest peaks that are above the clouds, it becomes too cold and your fuel won't recharge unless you fall below that point. So you'll need to be even more careful about using your tools sparingly. I've played a lot of climbing games in the last few years, but none that are from a first-person perspective. And this really makes a huge difference in how each jump feels, and the edge of your seat sensation as you barely reach the next handhold. It's equal parts tension and release. And when you're not concentrating on a tactical ascent, it's all about the cozy vibes that we've known from others in this genre. It truly ended up being a 10 out of 10 experience for me, and I wish more people would give it a shot. I feel like we're just barely scratching the surface when it comes to the potential of short hike-alikes. The original was a breath of fresh air in an industry trying to load too much unnecessary fluff into their titles. It got to the core of what makes games fun to play in the first place. And Lil Gator Game continues to be the shining example of how to replicate it, with a major DLC expansion coming next month. But I'm also thrilled about whatever else will come next, because the truth is, I simply can't get enough of these things. Have you played a short hike-alike that I didn't mention in this video that you really enjoyed? Let us all know in the comments below so we can share the love of what this style of game can offer. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Stay frosty, my friends.